Good day. My name is Nadine Franz, and today I will be presenting my dissertation to you. The title of my dissertation is A Phenomenological Case Study to Describe the Ageism-Induced Anxiety of Job Seekers aged 50 to 83. So before I get into this, I'd like to explain what ageism is. Ageism is also called age discrimination, and it is the prejudicial treatment of people based solely on their age. This terminology was coined by Dr. Robert Neil Butler in 1969, and he was a gerontologist. So ageism is pervasive during the job search process, and that's according to the US Department of Labor. And it perpetuates stereotypes of older people, results in biased hiring practices and decisions based on unfounded stereotypes, and creates barriers for employment or re-entry into the workforce for older people. It is also difficult to overcome and forces older job seekers to find creative ways to gain re-entry into the workforce. This issue creates anxiety, depression, and other types of suffering and trauma for older workers. So the literature revealed that employers fail to recognize the value of hiring older workers and instead focus on negative stereotypes that imply support of an ageist agenda. And it also asserted that older people offer tremendous talent to the workforce. The literature also revealed that the problem of ageism and the devaluing of older workers is carefully veiled, which makes it very challenging for older job seekers to prove that they have been the victim of age discrimination. And older job seekers are the victims of ageism, according to Lasansky, and they have no way to tangibly prove this to companies who find creative ways to circumvent the laws. So the purpose statement. This phenomenological case study explored the anxiety endured by 30 job seekers ages 50 to 83 as they sought new employment. Furthermore, this study informs employers of the effects of unfair recruiting and hiring practices on these job seekers, and it serves as an inspiration to help employers realize and value the expertise of older job seekers. Older job seekers must also be able to tell their stories of age discrimination and the role it plays in hindering their success throughout the workforce. And this research sheds light on ageism while driving attention for the need to change laws as well as change corporate policies as it relates to ageism. So now I will talk about the methodology. This phenomenological case study explored the ageism experienced by job seekers aged 50 to 83 while they were engaged in employment searches. And this qualitative methodology investigated and reported the ageism-induced anxiety experienced by vibrant older workers or job seekers desiring to stay in the workforce. Numerous data sources contributed to the data collection process to ensure accurate data triangulation and reporting. An accurate and unbiased data coding and analysis followed with significant themes and findings from the data, and several job seekers' emotions emerged from the data. So the primary research question was, how do job seekers aged 50 to 83 identify and describe the anxiety triggered by ageism while job hunting in the United States? I brought an emic perspective and positionality to this study, having been in the HR industry for almost 20 years and working in the past and currently with older job seekers who have expressed their concerns and anguish with ageism. The theoretical framework that I employed was the critical theory framework, which aims to fight for marginalized people. And the critical theory provided a lens that supported me in discussing ageism, identifying the lived experiences of older job seekers while criticizing the issue. I drew from the constructivist worldview that seeks to comprehend a phenomenon as told by the participants, as well as the transformative worldview that focuses on a need for social justice. And the participants were located throughout the United States in multiple states. So there was not one singular site. There were multiple sites as they were doing their job search within their home states, within their homes. And the participants shared experiences of the studied phenomenon and lived experiences of that, being engaged in that job search. So the data collection employed 4 different types of data collections. The first was I conducted 30 one-on-one interviews via Zoom. I also conducted focus groups of six focus groups rather, which utilized 18 of the 30 participants. I also reviewed data from online job postings, 50 of them to be exact, and I also employed a questionnaire that included 17 questions. I utilized open coding in categorizing the research data and findings, and axial and selective coding further enabled me to identify what the data revealed to support the research study. A pattern of ideas developed once the themes and categories emerged, and this process really helped me with categorizing the data without bias. Because of my awareness of the issue of ageism and having worked in the industry, I really had to do everything possible to ensure that I did not utilize my own judgment to cloud the findings. So limitations due to my emic perspective and prior existing relationships was something that I kept in mind to make sure that I addressed limitations and delimitations. So findings based on sex. Based on sex, 13 males and 11 females felt that their sex had no impact on their job search. However, 6 females felt that their sex or gender did come into play. With regard to race, 4 of the 5 Black participants felt that their race did play an issue in their job search, and 1 white male felt that him being white created a problem for companies who were more inclined to hire minorities for positions he was going for. And as far as age group, as people got older, during their job search, they tend to talk more about that fear of getting older while job seeking rather, because they felt that the older they got, the harder it would be for them to find employment. And 2 women who worked in IT felt that they were working in a very sexist industry that didn't value the contributions of women. As far as educational level, there was no difference based on that. As same goes for employment level. Interestingly, of the 4 people that applied for and obtained employment during my time with them during this study, 3 of the 4 were located in the Northeast and 1 in Kansas. So that makes me wonder is the Northeast more open to older job seekers? That's to be explored in another study. And the average job search ranged from 6 months to over 6 years. And males reported higher salaries than females, which did not surprise me. Okay, so data collection phase 2. What I noticed from the focus group was that people really built a camaraderie based on their shared experience, so they were willing to talk, exchange ideas, and just really support each other. And the artifacts review, out of the 50 positions I reviewed, 48 of them showed signs of ageism, which was very telling. And 28 of the 30 participants who completed the questionnaire indicated that ageism was an issue across the board. The participants were quite outspoken in the one-on-one interviews. The focus groups enabled bonding and empathy for each other. There was consistency in the data from the one-on-one interviews to the focus groups to the questionnaires. And what I noticed was there was a vulnerable exchange that prompted a lot of different insights throughout the focus groups. And the experience across gender and race generated, very little variance. I didn't really see much there. And women responded more easily than men, meaning that in my observation and conversations with the participants, women tended to handle the rejection and the impact it was having on them, for the most part, ageism, that is. So in conducting the cross-phase analysis, there was a high rate of ageism and lack of employment opportunities, regardless of age, sex, geographic location, etc. And the job search outlook, for the most part, seemed bleak for almost everyone I spoke with. They shared a feeling of rejection and workplace alienation, and many talked about the psychological and emotional impact of the job search. And there were feelings of anxiety and fear because of the inability to gain new employment or just the thought of it. So these graphics demonstrate to you just the prevalence of the feelings that were shared about by the job seekers, by the participants. As you can see, anxiety ranked high, frustration, a sense of hopelessness, a sense of disappointment, feeling devalued, stressed, etc. And this wasn't surprising to me that these were the emotions across the board, because just in listening to the individual stories, it was quite apparent that this was a very painful experience for most of the job seekers, if not all. So this might shed some light on why people might be feeling anxiety and all the other emotions that were expressed. So of 30 participants submitted 2,360 job applications, took an average of 36 months, and total interviews that were shared among the 30 participants was 194. Out of those 194 interviews, there were 4 hires. Now look at these numbers. This is very consistent with what the literature revealed. The percentage interviewed was only 8.2% of all of those who interviewed, and the percentage of hire was only 2.6%. That is quite alarming, and it makes sense, and it's very understandable why older job seekers feel so depressed and anxious about the job search process. The level of effort they're putting into their job search with all the qualifications they have is just not panning out for them. This table resulted from the questionnaire, rather this graphic resulted from the questionnaire. And the very first column responded to a question that asked about the job search process being welcoming to older job seekers. As you can see, the majority did not feel that it was a very welcoming experience. And the second column had to do with job descriptions, websites, application, and interview languages revealing ageism. As you can see, the majority agreed that there were signs of ageism. The third column, ageism makes me feel anxious and causes anxiety. As you can see, the majority agreed, and next to that, strongly agreed rather. And the fourth one, recruiters and hiring managers shows bias when interacting with me. As you can see, there was some, the majority were neutral here because they weren't sure, but many were in agreement and also strongly agreed. So those numbers outweighed the neutrals, but it was very telling that even though they know they're experiencing, it was hard to prove to them. And the experience with ageism makes me feel like quitting. This group was resilient. As much anxiety as they shared, as bad as the experiences were, they did not feel like quitting. They wanted to keep fighting. And the last column, ageism makes me feel devalued and frustrating. As you can see, strongly agree was overwhelming. So now I want to talk to you about the implications. The implications here, the goal that I have is to inform HR and recruiting decision makers throughout the development, overhauling, and application of non-ageist hiring practices. I want to make sure that employers are aware of their ageist bias and that they make every effort to implement non-ageist hiring practices. I want to see organizational changes, and a lot of companies talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but that typically does not include anything that has to do with ageism. So I want to make sure that this is embedded within their DEI strategy. And the recommendations for changing industry practices to eradicate workplace ageism, I've got 3 suggestions or 3 recommendations. One is for companies to recognize their own biases and do everything they can to use careful language in crafting their job descriptions and postings. Another one, like I said before, is to include anti-ageist agenda within their diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. And the third is to change procedures for how companies go about laying people off. Typically, older workers are the first to go because they're more expensive typically, or they are not valued as much. Distribution plan. I've got lots of plans. One is I would like to really put together training that targets DEI, HR, recruiting, and frontline leaders on how they can identify the issues within their organizations that perpetuates ageism so that they can address that holistically. Also, as was revealed throughout the study, many of the participants experienced some form of anxiety, depression, and I think it's very important for mental health professionals and healthcare workers to be aware of this as they are working with their patients. I'd like to inform lawmakers, work with lawmakers to push through agenda to recognize the issues that older job seekers face, and just anyone in general in society that's interested in seeing a more equitable workforce. This would be a great constituent as well to address. Sorry about that. And here we go. Okay. So, in conclusion, I, as an emerging scholar and as an HR practitioner, I am infuriated by the way in which older job seekers are treated. And this is in line with my positionality. My mindset is in line with the critical theory framework, where I want to advocate for these older workers. And I have a commitment to uncovering the issue of ageism and working with organizations and lawmakers to push through this agenda that will make sure that older job seekers are treated fairly, as they should. They do bring quite a bit of value to the workplace. They're seasoned, they've paid their dues, and they should not be shunned because of unfair stereotypes and biases. Here are a list of my references, and I thank you so much for listening to me today. I hope you found my presentation insightful, and I look forward to your questions. Again, thank you so much.